Hey there, welcome to saas.unbound podcast. I'm your host, I'm Nadena, head of growth at saas group, serial acquirer of buying wonderful SaaS businesses to take them to the next level. And here I chat with inspiring founders and experts to get an inside scoop on how they made their business success. And today with me is Tobias, CEO and co-founder of Awork, a project management tool for happy collaboration. I mean, I'm already sold. Tell me more. And welcome to the
Hi everyone,
show.
hi Anna. Thanks.
Yeah.
Glad to be here. Yeah. Happy collaboration. Yeah, business software is gray. Business software is. If you ask people what color is business software, they're gonna go gray because it's gray and it's lots of windows and modals and buttons and everything is boring. But life isn't boring. Business usually, hopefully, isn't all too boring, and software shouldn't be either. That's not the motivation and that's not the pitch for Awork. It actually does a very good job at managing your projects and work, but we feel like there's a bit too much seriousness in business software at the moment.
Yeah, I can back you up there. I mean, if you're asking me like what like imagine the office, it would be grayish with sparks of Excel. So yeah, it's
True.
yeah, very weird. Okay. Well, before we get into the whole A work story, let's get into your story. I know that there's been a previous startup that you run for a bit and then sold, and that you're a mechanical engineer, but yeah, you'll
True.
tell it better. So
All
yeah,
right.
maybe in 1 minute, who's Tobias?
All right, I'll try to keep it brief. So yeah, Tobias was born in Germany, so I'm German. But I moved to Switzerland and Sweden when I was a kid. So I spent a lot of time abroad, learned French and Swedish, and then came back to Germany to become an engineer because I always wanted to become an inventor. That was sort of my childhood answer to the question, "What are you going to be once you grow up?" And my answer was always, "I'm going to be an inventor." And I thought being an engineer is the closest real world thing there is to being that. So I gave it a good try, did a master's in engineering, and then recognized that I'm not going to be a mechanical engineer after all because I find it quite tedious in the end. So it's interesting to learn, but then really jumping through the hoops wasn't my thing. So I had a look around, did some consulting early where I met my co-founders and realized being an entrepreneur or doing something entrepreneurial fascinates me a lot more. Bringing some business into the technical side of things was really what caught on. And so we started a business right out of uni, basically, called used to be called HQ Labs. Today it's called the Every Group. And we ran that for 10 years roughly. It turned out to become the biggest ERP for creative agencies in the DACH region. So software as a service, very financially driven. So the whole finance process, the you can write quotes and invoices and et cetera, et cetera. Um, and that was a lot of fun, but it was also a very slow process, obviously. First time SaaS founders, we made every mistake of the book, I guess. But then after 10 years, it turned out to be quite successful. And we sold it to a private equity company also from Hamburg by coincidence in 2021. And by that point, we had already started building Awork because we'd been watching those creative agencies and creative teams for so long, struggling not only with their financial side of the business, but really with the day-to-day org. And that goes for a lot of professional services companies, but creatives more so than most others because they're just it's not what they do and it's not what they like. Organizing things is not their strong suit. And from that, we had the immediate idea, let's go again, let's start another business and really focus on that. And so we knew there was a market for it. We knew that there was demand for it. We knew they were underserved by all the big players in the market. So we really started again. And I myself, I started basically writing code in the beginning. Then from writing code, I switched to sales. I was the one who drew the shortest straw. So I had to pick up the phone and go find some clients. And from sales, I switched to marketing. I ran performance marketing for a couple of years. And then with Awork, I switched into the CEO role. So I really tried to focus on strategy development and comms, team building, investors. That's what I try to really focus on as much as I can at the moment. Yeah, I guess that's about it.
All right, that's great. I mean, it seems like there is a lot more to play with in business than in mechanical engineering. So I
Oh yeah.
guess that's very appealing to you. But like right off the bat, okay. So you had an idea, you had the market. Um, what is the kind of the big vision? How you revolutionizing the your customers' workflow, the way
Right.
those creatives work and organize what they do.
Right. So with Awork, we also started out building really 4 creative teams, and then we expanded that a little. So right now we focus really on a lot of professional services business. So if you have projects that you run for clients, and that would be creative agencies, consultants, etc., etc., and these teams require a lot more planning focused work management than everybody else. So they need to make plans. Sounds weirdly obvious, but it's not. They need more than just a to-do list and just a simple project management tool or a Kanban board. What they need to know is, can they tackle another projects 3 months down the road? And do they have the team and the resources and the capacity to do that? They also need to know, at the other end of the spectrum, Monday morning, 9 o'clock, which one of my 3D artists can do the logo for client B because he needs it Monday by noon. So there's the whole stretch from long-term resource management to very short-term calendar-based accuracy. And all of that in one environment, which doesn't exist. It sounds weird, but it really doesn't exist. And then there is an additional factor. These teams are extremely collaborative. So they have tons of freelancers. They usually have several partners joining on one project. They usually have a whole bunch of clients that they need to sync and coordinate with. So all of their planning is done cross-company. Which also doesn't exist. So to make it very clear to everybody who's sort of familiar with the tech scene, Slack Connect for work management has not been built, and it's overdue. So that's sort of what we're evolving Awork into, handling that planning focus and making that cross company, enabling that across companies is really what makes Awork tick. Now that is sort of the special flavor of work management that we're building, and it really resonates with this kind of team because they struggle with seriously emails, Excel, whatever you can sort of send to a client who doesn't have your infrastructure available, and it's a huge pain. So that's what we're building.
Okay, interesting. That's really fascinating. But like since COVID, right, and since we all went remote, collaboration is this huge, huge topic, right? And especially, I feel like now since kind of the hype of remote is a little bit like dying down, and people actually want to figure out how to work together and how to collaborate as a functioning team, uh, this kind of tools are more and more in demand. So, like, what is the, um, how do you think like the teamwork, especially for your customers, for your potential customers, would look like in the future, or for teams in general? And how does it look for you guys? Because you're also, very creative and have a lot of things going on.
Right. So what's the future of collaboration in a nutshell? I truly believe that we'll be even more interconnected between teams and companies. So, I don't know, a decade ago, we used to call that virtual teams. Nowadays, it has become so common practice that we not even give it a special name anymore. But I think the borders of where one company, one team, one service provider begins and where another and where it ends will be way more diffuse. I really believe the freelancing trend, even though right now, because of the sort of the bigger economic climate, the freelance sector is not having a good time. I really believe that we're seeing a trend here where more small teams, virtual teams, solopreneurs will play a part in the way that services are provided. And also within companies, especially if we talk about knowledge work, people and their roles will be more diffuse, and that's the necessity for more flexible, more connected work management. So team collaboration will be more fluent than what we used to, from the past and at the present. I also truly believe, and we have data to back that up, that hybrid work is here to stay. So hybrid work, and to put that into perspective, so people who at least spend 2 days away from the office per week, or teams who are spread across geographies, are absolutely here to stay, and that has already become the dominant way to work at the moment, with more than 50% of people actually working in a sort of a hybrid setup at the moment. Also, that goes for knowledge work, obviously, not for other industries. And so also collaboration and teamwork will have to permanently adapt to that. Even for companies who force their people to stay in the office and who really put a lot of effort into the location, they will have to work in hybrid setups with more partners, freelancers, clients all the time. And we need more tools, processes, and also we'll need to rethink and evolve the way that we do project management in the broadest sense of the word to account for that, which means better target definitions and also tools that make it possible to review agreed upon targets and deliverables in an easier way than we can today, which means more integrated communication channels that so the same sort of movement that we're seeing in more end consumer communications where messaging tools become interoperable. We'll have to see similar patterns in business collaboration as well. So all of these things, they take care of connecting people across jobs, across teams, and across company borders will boom over the next couple of years.
So how does it work for you in Awork? Like, what is there some special sauce that makes your team the team, and your collaboration the collaboration that everyone should adopt?
So from the very beginning, and the way that we think about Awork as a team is a bit of a petri dish for trying these sort of new work setups. And that was the deal. That's part of our product, to be honest. So we deliver the software and we also deliver good examples for what actually works and what doesn't. So we do experiment with the way that we collaborate a lot, deliberately. And also try things that may seem weird in the very beginning, but we really try to make these sort of modern collaboration setups work. And then we talk about it and we build that into our product from the experience that we have. And for reference, we're about 50 people to sort of know how much collaboration is required. And we designed the company from the get-go as a hybrid team. Including myself, I moved between Hamburg and Milan, so that's a bit of a weird setup there as well for personal reasons. Our CTO is a digital nomad; he doesn't have a fixed address at all. So we do have people moving around on the leadership level as well, which I think is super important if you're serious about this. There has to be leadership support for these setups. And since we've built for a hybrid setup from the very, very beginning, we've put methods and just team culture in place that supports that. For example, we do 4 on-sites, off-sites per year. So every 3 months, we get everybody together. We fly everyone in. It's expensive and has other disadvantages, but it's required to get that sort of face time involved that really builds culture and connection. We do weekly all hands, which is a lot. So the entire team spends an hour a week together for strategy communications, open AMAs, etc., and we really invest time. We have a standing rhythm of social donut calls, whether you're in the same place or remote. So at least you have to meet at least one other person from the team for half an hour every week, and that's sort of a random loop that we go through. For everybody who's on site in and around Hamburg, we have a really nice office that also delivers the location, which is I truly believe that having a fixed location that just looks, feels, and smells Aworky is kind of a nucleus where the whole thing that makes the Awork culture tick sort of condenses, and people can come there and they enter the office and they go, oh yeah, right, this is what Awork feels like. And that's also a super important side of being a hybrid team. So that's the cultural setup. And then in terms of infrastructure, we're obviously tool nerds. So everything is run and powered by Awork. All the projects and all the day-to-day org is handled in Awork. But we really try to double down on tool usage. So Slack, Notion, Awork, and all of those tools are really core to whatever we do. And then there's obviously a couple of rules that really enforce their use.
That's probably one of the best recruitment pitches I've ever heard. And
it wasn't even meant as one.
I mean, seriously, if I wasn't as happy with saas Group, I would be like, I'm sending you my CV. But obviously, before going into this episode, I was creeping around everything you did online, right? And I really love that bit that you have on your social media that says, my role as a CEO includes team building, fundraising, and otherwise getting out of everyone's way. And I absolutely loved it because, well, we talk about it a lot in terms of acquisitions, at least at saas group. But why do you think that's the ultimate goal that you have as a CEO of Awork?
There's two sides to that. So the first one is, and it's not the most famous version of that quote is by Steve Jobs, obviously, hire good people and then let them do their job or whatever. I don't remember it verbatim, so I didn't come up with the idea, but I truly believe in it, and I believe that it's one of the biggest challenges as a founder who is also very much involved in the day to day from the beginning. And my skill set is rather broad. I can write some code. I can do some decent baseline designing. I can do some web development. I can do a sales call. I've been in those positions. So as a founder with sort of a very broad background, it is super easy to just double down everywhere and micromanage whatever is going on and just step into every project that's just screaming for attention at the moment. And I think that's a total trap, especially if you're trying to grow quickly and you're trying to launch projects all the time. You need to empower people that you bring on board. And I really admire the team that we have. And we were even able to bring, and I think that's something that we might touch upon a little later. We were able to bring a couple of people from the first company over to Awork, so people that we knew we could work with, and they are very good at what they do. So the question is, why do I bring them on board if I'm still the one meddling in their day to day? And based on that belief, we've actually introduced a whole framework, which is one of the most important elements of the culture as we practice it at Awork. It's called the ownership framework. So every person on board gets an ownership document when they join. It's sort of something that you do within the first couple of weeks, where you define the scope of ownership. So what part of Awork is yours? And within that part of Awork, you're free to do whatever you want, more or less, obviously. And what we do is we talk about the goals, what targets, what KPIs are yours to move. And then you're obviously accountable and responsible for making it happen, but people won't tell you how. And I truly believe that unlocks a lot of creativity, a lot of motivation, a lot of accountability across the team, and also trains our management team to let go and focus on their actual job, which is enabling the team, building the team, and making the bigger strategic decisions instead of wasting their 5 to 7 days a week on sort of day-to-day details. And I think that's my belief. And also what actually makes me the happiest is when I can get out of people's way and just watch them build amazing stuff and focus on providing the infrastructure, be that culture, be that team, be that hiring, be that funding. Because in the end, the funds that we have in the bank are just infrastructure we need to build. Yeah.
That's great. That makes a whole lot of sense. But as you mentioned, there were a couple of people that you brought from your first company, and that was kind of my question, a follow-up question, because we already mentioned that you've sold the first company and kind of carved out what would have become Awork
Yes.
already while the deal was going on. So first question, I guess, how did you communicate this with your acquirers? Like, were they okay with the fact that, you're taking something with you and you're taking someone with you? So were they okay with that? And how did this go?
Yeah, good question. So maybe for the setup. So at the time we had the original product called the HQ was in place, was growing, but not super fast. So it wasn't a traditional VC case anymore. So we were growing, I don't know, maybe 40 to 50% annually, roughly. So healthy growth, but not like double or triple every year. And it was very, very profitable. And we used those funds to invest in Awork. So bottom line, we were sort of aiming for a zero at the end of the year. So the new product was basically eating up all the profits from the old product, which was sort of an okay setup. But it also made a couple of things very difficult for us. It was very difficult to find VC investors into that two-product conglomerate because they were very, very much keen on investing in the new product with high growth potential, but not so much into the sort of a little more old school, very profitable business. And also the other way around, it wasn't easy to find partners for the very profitable old business because they didn't want to burn all the profits with a new high-risk project that they sort of didn't find interesting. So that made it very difficult to maneuver. And in 2021, the tension and especially the acquisition climate was really good, obviously. So we started talking to people about the idea of splitting the company and maybe getting investors or acquirers for one of the two businesses. And then at one point we met our acquirer, Bid Equity. It's public info. And their business model is buying SaaS businesses that are slightly more traditional and usually rather profitable, and then moving into that sort of buy and build strategy where they buy a couple of competitors and merge them into one group, which in our case now is the Every Group, and then they use that to get leverage in the market, and then at some point they sell it on to the next bigger PE. And so we were extremely transparent about it from the get-go. So we told them there is this business, we think it fits the model super well, and we can deliver it in perfect condition. We even have new management on the team, but there's two things that will have to happen. Number one, we'll have to do a carve out of Awork because we want to continue to work on that. And two, because we want to continue work on that, we're going to have to be 100% out of the company, including those people that we need to continue building Awork. But apart from that, we're going to do everything to make the transition as smooth as possible. We're going to help with contacts to the industry. We'll do the sort of the handover to new management, which had basically already happened. We'll do all of that, but those are the two things that we can't live without. And then obviously, to a certain degree, they made us pay for that. I guess that had some significant impact on valuation. But overall, that way the transaction made a lot of sense for us. And obviously, we got funds from the exit to invest into Awork and give us a sort of our own seed round, if you will, which was also very nice. So I think for everybody involved, something kind of unique in the situation came together. And because we were very upfront about it, that was clear from the get-go. And so I think we just negotiated the rest along the way.
Yeah. So we always say like acquisition is just a very honest conversation. So it's just whatever you need, you have to tell that right away. Otherwise, there's just so much other stuff is going to come up during the due diligence. Yeah. But that said, you had a pretty good experience with acquisition. Building Awork, are you building and like having in mind that you're making yourself redundant as the CEO? Are you building with an exit in mind?
Yes, because this time around we decided to go for a more traditional VC track. So we did a Series A with a fund from France 1.5 years ago. And then, once you commit to that, you're kind of set to at some point deliver exit value to your investors. So I guess we're set on that track. And the reason being that even though we found our niche in that work management market, the market is a crowded one. So some scale and some speed is required to make this work mid and long term. And this has been for us also a very positive experience. So I was kind of skeptical before embarking in that direction, but we found investors that we work with and match with really, really well. And so far, it's been a great experience. And I think it gives us that edge and that speed that we need, because even though we are VC funded, our direct competitors have literally more employees than we have clients. So we need at least some firepower to move. Otherwise, they will just run us over.
Yeah, that's true. That makes sense. So, talking about that, right, and about your growth, I know that you're fairly focused on growing within Europe, like before going to anywhere else.
Right.
Why this kind of strategy? What are the benefits for you there?
Right. So obviously, being a European company in Europe is just a bit of a natural unfair advantage when you're competing with mainly Silicon Valley and Israel-based competitors. And we'd be stupid to just leave that on the table. And the other way around, it's pretty clever, I think, or just very natural move to try to exploit that as much as possible. And that goes even stronger, obviously, in the German-speaking markets, because it's very easy for us to provide German messaging, German support channels, etc., etc. So doubling down where it's easiest in the beginning and build a bit of a brand, some scale, and be able to move from that is just, I think, a very natural way of thinking about it, especially as long as the market is still large enough and the amount of people in the market for a tool like ours at any given time is still large enough to sustain that level of growth that we're trying to achieve. We do revisit that decision and that track from time to time. It's the board meeting where it doesn't come up is very rare. So usually we do have a discussion about this, because obviously it's also attractive with a product like Awork that really doesn't change when going international on a product basis. We do have to localize, obviously, but the product itself is completely agnostic. So why not try to address basically a global market with it? Sounds super attractive, but obviously it's the distraction of a century if you're trying to set up working processes first. But the question is, when have we reached that level of maturity where we can move into the next stage? And I think sometime over the next, 12 to 18 months, we'll give it another really good try. But for now, doubling down just means on the German-speaking markets, and then sort of the closer European markets, just means focus wherever we can.
I mean, it seems like you're doing a great job. Like recently, you've been ranked number 1 out of like older projects and work management tools by OMR reviews, right? And who doesn't know, OMR reviews is like G2 of DACH region, so all the German-speaking countries. Their top 100 reports. So congratulations, that's quite an achievement.
Yeah, super proud of that.
Yeah. So how do you work? I mean, you just mentioned that you've got a ton of customers, and I assume based on their report, they're quite happy. So how do you work with customers and customer feedback, and the whole customer communication, because that's kind of your domain, right?
Yeah, right. A couple of things we do. So first of all, we really try to focus on product quality quite a lot. So when you're in B2B SaaS, and especially in a market that potentially is as broad as ours from a feature perspective, you can do whatever you want. You can just churn out features day by day, no problem at all. Just look at tools like ClickUp. They have a feature for everything that you can imagine. It just remains very shallow. And if you do that, you can never double down on really delivering product quality, especially early on. I mean, if you reach the scale where you have literally thousands of developers, that may be a different story. But at our stage, that's also one of those traps that we're trying to avoid, to not make the product too broad. So really staying focused and delivering product quality and product value to that particular very precise use case that we have in mind. And then we really try to offer as much support as service as we can. So there is a personal hotline that is available every day, where somebody actually answers the phone without a queue. We do all the live chat stuff that everybody does these days, but we try to really double down on delivering quality support fast. We do have a user community, something rather recent that we've launched a couple of months ago, where we really try to connect our users. And then also we engage, and I try to engage a lot with our users. I do Ask Me Anythings in the community, for example, where people just ask me whatever, and I really try to go to some length to explain how we think about the product, how we think about client value, try to engage with their feedback as much as possible. And then obviously when it comes to reviews, we do ask for reviews actively. So whenever we have the feeling that a client is really happy, we do approach them and ask them to give a review, because it is one of the most important currencies that we have in a market, again, where it's difficult to explain why you're better than a client who's 10 times your size. So we need those testimonials, those honest client opinions, to tell everybody that it actually works better and it's worth the switching cost. And because that's so important, we invest so much in that part of the business.
All right. One question that I always kind of want to ask, if a founder tells me there is a hotline, but somehow never do, how often does this phone ring?
It does ring. So
do people still talk to people? Like,
oh yeah, Oh yeah, we sometimes forget, right? Our clients are also the entire demographic, right? So all ages there, uh, not only very phone shy millennials and Gen Zs. No, but people do call. We have a support team. I think we have 3 full-time staff on support, and they handle tickets, chats, and hotline in shifts basically. And I would say we have about 10 to 20-ish calls, literal phone calls a day, I would say.
Okay.
And that is for an active user base of 30,000 paid users, I think, ish. So it's not that
Okay.
many.
It still rings. I mean, it's
But
there for
for
a
those,
reason.
but the thing is, those are the clients who have, and usually, I mean, sometimes it's just whatever a regular support call. Somebody likes to speak on the phone, but from time to time, those are actually the interactions that are more complex, more difficult to explain. Take some, I don't really know what's going on, but I think something's broken here, which you really can't do over a chat. And the chat conversation becomes very frustrating from a client perspective very quickly when you just don't know what the hell is going on, but something's broken and you really need help now. And that can be so frustrating. And just offering the relief of, just give us a call and we'll help you. It's all right. It's good. We have very patient people on the support staff. Sometimes that's all the difference. And then who is that? You have the CEOs, the admins, the people who are super important for us. Those are the people calling, and then they call with their most complex cases. And then if we're able to deliver a stellar support experience 5 to 10 times a day, that is a lot of goodwill that we can build on our client side.
Okay, yeah, thank you. All right, so you started talking about features, and like you said, you're competing with a ton of much bigger tools, and they've got a button for every button that you want out there. So how do you prioritize like which feature is being built? Is it just your
Right.
customers? Is it just your vision? Is it
Hmm.
just a kind of a hybrid approach? What's
Yeah.
important for you when you decide what's being built?
Yeah, super good question and a constant sort of, I'll call it a struggle, but I think it's just the usual way that this works. If you work with clients a lot, you have that constant struggle of clients just being very passionate about that one thing that will fit their exact process that they're in need of. Then you have client teams who just empathize a lot with their recent client or their next sales deal or whatever would make their quota this month. And then you have a product team with a very long-term standing product vision, obviously, that may not include any of the before. And so that struggle is real. And I think every product-driven team knows that very well. And what we do, and I just wrote a very long post about that in our community as well, because we get asked that by our users as well. We have kind of a loop going on. So there is this mid to long term product vision of the broad fields that we want Awork to excel at. And I already talked about a couple. So it's that planning focus, it's the integration of planning, scheduling, project management, time tracking, it's this cross company collaboration. And these are big projects, front end heavy, a lot of experimentation. Delivering a feature like that can take 6 to 12 months easy, especially if we do loops and try to improve in several releases, etc., etc. And those are pretty much our own vision of what we'd like the product to do long term and where we really see the impact in the market that we can have. And those are not that much influenced by client feedback. It might sound harsh, but that's just the truth. Because obviously, we approached this market with a certain product vision, and delivering that has been the vision from the very beginning, and we haven't changed it. We might at some point, but for now, we haven't. So that one is pretty much our own thing. But then around that, on the way there is so much in the details. There are so many features that just enable use cases on the way. A recent example, custom fields, a classic for any business software. So for Awork, you have a task and the task has a name and a description. But then ask 10 clients and they want 25 other informations attached to that task. So do you build a feature that will make that dynamic? And we've long been we've been trying to avoid that because obviously it creates a ton of interface complexity, of reporting complexity, of performance issues, etc., etc., etc. It just doesn't look nice. And so we've been trying to avoid that. But there's so much client demand for it. And also our client teams keep mirroring that this would enable so many use cases, which we're just missing out at the moment, that now we've actually included that into the roadmap based on this. And that still is a pretty big feature. For smaller ones, that is something that goes in much smaller loops and just informs our everyday product decisions. And we add things here and there wherever we can to incorporate them. So I guess that's the balance that we're trying to do. The big things, pretty much no influence. The little things, lots of influence all the time.
Okay. Is there like a special process or a special flow that you have to ship in new features? Like, I don't know, 6 weeks, like Basecamp does it, or like anything that, that you've installed that works for you?
Yep. We've been actually trying a lot of things there recently and sort of reorganized our entire product delivery flow quite a lot. And we're stealing from all the best ones. So we have that rough 6 to 7 week cycle, the development cycle for our releases roughly. And we now have we have 4 standing product teams. We have one for the time tracking features, one for the work management features, one for the infrastructure and framework. It's just 3. And they are pretty much independent. So they do their own roadmaps, and they always consist of front end, back end, product management and design. So they're pretty much independent, and some of them will release in that 6 to 7 week release cycle, but then for another team they may be working on something bigger and they will only release after 2 or 3 cycles or whatever. And that also gives us way more flexibility to keep shipping new things in different areas of the product without the whole thing being too confusing. And then who's involved? We have a product team. They do the product research, the feature design, the interface design, etc. And they're also split into those different teams. Then there's the engineering team. Obviously, they then build the feature and make it ready. And then we do sort of team-wide testing before release. We've just gotten rid of our staging environment. I don't know if maybe that's interesting for other product teams. So we used to have a classic development environment, staging environment, production environment set up. And then when something was almost ready, we pushed it to staging, which is where we used to work. And then when that was tested, we shipped it to production. We just got rid of that because I think getting rid of that safety net everywhere is a very necessary process to really be conscious about the quality of things that you build early on, and not just move something into the next stage of the cycle simply because you think, well, somebody's going to test it anyways. No, you're responsible for testing it, and when you're happy with it, we're going to ship it because we trust your conscious quality choices. And we're trying to do a lot of these decisions at the moment to just get rid of the slack in the whole system, not the app, but the actual slack, and to just be more direct and more conscious in the product decisions that we make. And I think that's a really, really good move. And even though we were slightly scared of it, obviously, I think it will deliver better quality for our clients in the long term.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of talk how, bringing back the constraints, even if you're VC backed and you have the safety net and you're able to maybe hang on for a while, it's still kind of better. Like you said, it brings the responsibility back and just kind of makes everyone move. But one other question that I had, I started thinking about it when you talked about the whole like collaboration between the sales and the marketing and the product teams and everything. And obviously there is a lot of discussion how it should be done, like who's responsible for the leads and who's responsible for closing the deals and everything. How does it work for you guys? Like, I mean, is there still like the chicken and egg situation? Like, is marketing responsible for bringing the leads, and the sales qualifies them and closes the deals, or like how does it work?
Right. We do not do any outbound sales. It's all inbound, and the major driver of that is our performance marketing setup. So in plain English, we do a lot of ads. And we've been doing that for almost 10 years. So the setup is pretty much in place and very sophisticated when it comes to attribution and how we run campaigns, etc. And usually, so our core process is marketing is responsible for delivering leads, and leads are for us completed trial signups. So when someone signs up for a trial, they jump through a couple of hoops, verification, and we ask them a couple of questions about team size, goals, etc., etc. Based on that, we score leads live, basically, and based on that, our sales team engages with the high potential leads. We do have way more trial signups than our sales team can handle, so they use that lead scoring to sort of skim the most promising leads and engage with them and give them a good onboarding and trial experience. And so that's roughly where the responsibility splits between marketing and sales for us. And then with the sale, we hand over to customer success. If there's sometimes we do offer onboarding services, for example, for larger clients. And that's where we then again hand it over to the next team, which works pretty well for us. I think that would have to change if we ever do a bigger part of outbound sales, etc. Then obviously that responsibility is changed. But for now, as long as we're pretty much inbound driven, that's how it works.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you. And one more thing that also we discuss a lot here is pricing. Oh my God. Again,
Right.
like who's doing that? Like, is it the CEO? Is it like completely top down?
Yeah.
Where does your decision come from? And yeah, who owns pricing at Awork?
That is a very good question. I think it's one of the very few important topics that doesn't have a real owner. So, and for just historical reasons, and I don't even know why. It's just the way it is. It doesn't really have a good owner. And I think maybe that's a problem. But we are quite active with experimenting and changing our pricing. So we've just increased prices last year as well, quite significantly. And that decision is then usually driven by our management board. So we're a team of 7. So my direct team is a team of 7. And we do revisit the topic pricing in that round pretty frequently. And then because pricing needs so much input from so many different teams, we do need direct feedback from our client teams, obviously, who tell us what is the pricing conversations in sales deals. Do we have pricing conversations, and if we don't, are we too cheap? Do we have to move up market to just get a couple of those famous, I don't know, 20-30% of deals that you should lose because you're too expensive? Do we see them? Are they there? Do they talk to us? And if not, do we lose them before they ever do a sign up? Because we're very transparent with pricing. So can we find out on the marketing side, can we track how many people will leave after checking our pricing and never return, which would inform sort of a slightly different direction for change. And then we bring all of that together in the leadership round and then design a new pricing based on that. But it's one of the very, very few important topics that really doesn't have one single owner at Awork. And again, I think I'm not sure that's good, but for now it works quite well.
I mean, from my experience interviewing like almost 150 founders, it's never one person. I think I've never no, I'm wrong. There was one episode where there, but it's one person, founder, employee, and the ultimately the person who decides on the pricing. It's the one person only.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the only example I have. Otherwise, yeah, I think it's the same everywhere. But it's great that we got kind of the burning topics out of the way, and we're back to like your personal experience. So a couple of questions that I always ask on the podcast is first, what's so far? I mean, I'm listening to you, and you seem very happy, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be difficult to reflect on the failures. But let's start with the wins. What's been the biggest win for Awork and for you?
So the biggest win for Awork, I think, is the ability to, it's something that happened really early and was built into the DNA of Awork, to be able to start with a whole team of people being able to speed up to just immediately set up processes that we knew would work together was such a blessing. I think we jump started the business and the business model so much and so fast. And obviously, you don't always have the situation that you have a founding team of almost 7 people who've known each other and whom you can trust to do their thing. But to really get experienced people on board after the first time around, just being super junior ourselves, having no idea how anything worked at all, to wow, this is all accelerating super fast, has been such a nice experience, both for me personally as well as for the company at large. I think has been a huge boon. And I mean, the biggest achievements, we have a couple of amazing clients these days where whenever I see them work in Awork, that's so amazing, because as a work management tool, we always think ourselves as being that organization, and whatever they do is powered by Awork, right? That's kind of how we think about it. And then when you look at anything from really big campaigns out there that are being built by teams who work in Awork, and we see them every day on the subway in the cities everywhere, and we go, yeah, this is built with Awork. To big NGOs like Viva Con Agua, for example, who's working completely based on Awork structure, and we know that they build amazing projects all over the world, and they're all powered by Awork. And the list is so long these days that it's really humbling. We look at that list from time to time, and it's astonishing. That's one of the super nice things that we have the fortune of watching grow as we go.
That's awesome. I really love that part of the podcast. I mean, seriously, it's so fascinating to see all the wins. But yeah, if there is a failure, or maybe, a mistake that you kind of like, oh, okay, wins when you when you remember. Was there anything?
I mean, on a day-to-day, we do run a little program at Awork. It used to be called Fail of the Month. Now it's called Oof, like the German, when you make a mistake and then you have to kind of sigh. Where we actually talk about fails that we collect, to just make them very transparent, and make it transparent for everyone what happened, how we think about it, how we dealt with it, etc., etc., etc. And there's a lot of things going on there all the time that go wrong. But fortunately for Awork, I would say we haven't had any catastrophes this time around yet. We're going to get there, but not yet. But I remember that sort of at our previous company at HQ Labs, we did make a couple of mistakes that really resulted in bigger pivots for the entire business model. So in the very beginning, we tried to sell SaaS to mechanical engineers in sort of Germany's suburban business parks, at a time when they didn't even have internet connection in their offices. So sometimes you just make mistakes that you're just so green about. We didn't have any idea. We expected everybody to be super connected all the time, and then you'd start to ship your solution to clients, and you realize, oh my God, we're so completely wrong about the market. We do have to move everything into a different direction. I think those are sort of the biggest kind of, and are they mistakes? Well, to some degree they are, but they're also just part of that product market fit development cycle that you go through. But I think some of those are so consequential that they're very memorable. And also in terms of mistakes, we have a couple of funny funding stories. I remember our very first investment pitch was at a very very wealthy private equity person, also here in Hamburg, and we got invited for a pitch, and we weren't ready. And at the time, we still thought it would be prudent to sort of have a printed out business plan. And they called, and they were like, "You have an appointment in 30 minutes." So my co-founder and me, we were like, printed everything and then tried to fit it in a folder on the way there, ripped it half apart, arrived there, was super sweaty. We're sitting there trying to give a pitch, and in the end, it was, "I didn't like anything of what you just told me, and you seem to have no idea at all. It was nice talking to you." And, so some of these experiences are just, I'll never forget the feeling of sitting there and feeling extremely stupid. But I think they're also just a very good learning curve.
Right. Yeah, definitely. We call them learnings here. So, but cheers to not having like a big failure. That's really great. And yeah, the last question is always about a hack, right? So anything unconventional that's kind of like, huh, didn't think like that would work for me, but now it's kind of a thing you go to.
I was I tried to come up with something that is really unconventional, and I think one thing that I thought about a ton of growth hacks, and I think our growth hacks are not that innovative. We just try to execute sort of very very streamline processes all across that go-to-market motion all the time. But I thought I might share something that I found very helpful in building company culture instead. We do have 9 company values. That's quite a lot, right? So nine values is a lot, but they have been extremely substantial and helpful in the way that we build the company, all the way from they're a fundamental part of every hiring interview to they are a fundamental element of our performance reviews to how they guide the way that we learn and give feedback and expect performance as well. And the way that we created those is not, we didn't sit down around a table and just brainstormed a couple of values and then decided on the favorites. We asked our team to tell stories. So anonymously, we set up a form and we asked them to submit stories from their history with us and Awork and the previous company, and just tell stories that they thought were very typical for us. And boy, did people submit stories. So we received about 300 individual stories, and then we put together a team, male, female, people who've been with us for a while, new hires, engineers, marketers. So we tried to make it kind of diverse. And we read every single story together, all 300, whatever, and we extracted the value behind the story. So we built a huge kind of value board. We clustered them, etc., etc., and then we looked at them, and there were a couple that we really wanted to get rid of, where we really thought, oh my God, it's true, but boy, do we have to get rid of this. And so we decided to put them on a kind of a blacklist and have been actively working to erase them from what's Awork culture. Then we had a couple of ones that we really loved, so we tried to enforce them. And we had a couple where we thought, well, maybe there are a couple of blind spots, so we need to add things to make this really Aworky. And then based on that, we tried to reduce further and further and further. And once we reached those 9 that we have today, it felt like we couldn't remove anything else. And that's how we arrived at those values. And they've been super stable for years now. We're very happy with them. And they are super easy to work with on a day-to-day basis. And I think that was it was also a very positive self-reflection exercise that we did, that if you have the time and the resources, I would recommend everybody to give it a try. It was super fun and also very helpful in building team culture.
That's great. But I will never forget myself if I don't ask, like, what were the 2 that were blacklisted?
um, so there were a couple. Let me think if I remember 2 very precise ones at the top of my head. I think we did have, I don't remember the exact sort of verbatim wording that we had.
Yeah.
But we did have a little bit of a blame culture. Something went wrong and somebody would point a finger pretty quickly, which we thought was very toxic, not psychological safe, and not really helpful. So we really worked on getting rid of that. Was there a more fun one, maybe? I do remember we still have a bit of a party culture from time to time. We like to give a good
Right.
party. But in the early days, I mean, also pretty typical, that tended to take a bit of the upper hand from time to time. So we tried to reduce that a little as well. Those are just 2 that I remember right now from the process. There were a couple more, though.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for sharing. I mean, that's been great. But it's been awesome talking with you. I mean, I'll be
Likewise.
like, honestly, I can already tell you right now that I would be happy to do it again, because there's, I think, a lot more to uncover. I mean, at least 2 more that you erased. So, but yeah, thanks for sharing this story. It's really great to, um, well, to creep around what you do on social media. At least, like, I'm seriously a big fan of everything you guys are posting. But
Thanks.
yeah, really looking forward to see where you're at next year. And obviously, you're invited to our next Hamburg event with saas Group. So hope to see you there.
Perfect. It was a blast. See you there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you
Bye,
and
everyone.
take care.